All right, it is that time again, time for Sidekicks, and as you see, a full studio today. Jimmy Walker joining us for the first time this season, the Executive Director of Coaching for Pace Center. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate that. And these other two guys, well, we're just used to them being here all the time. And it's Chris Black of St. Ursula, Francis Stevens, Assistant Coach at Northview. All right, fellas, now, you know at home, we always talk local soccer. Big week coming up next week as the postseason begins, and we will talk a lot about that next week. But this week, we're talking about what everyone's talking about. U.S. men's national team does not make the World Cup. Francis Stevens, we're going to start it with you. Lord help us.
Well, the bottom line is we're just a very arrogant federation. You know, I think we've gotten to a point where we think we can do a lot of things that we can't. I think we've gone away from the style that's worked for us from, the years we've went. You look back at 2002, we've gotten to the quarterfinal. Bruce Arena was a coach of that team. They got to the quarterfinal in 06, lost in the first round. And then in 2010, Bob Riley takes them to the round of 16. Jurgen Klinsmann gets in the round of 16 back 4 years ago. And now we can't win games in CONCACAF in the Hex. I mean, we can't beat Trinidad and Tobago and get a point on the road. The biggest problem for me I have with this, if you look at every sports system in the United States, if you look at the way basketball is organized, you look at the way any other baseball, hockey, it's a grassroots sport. You look at like the shoe companies like the EYBL and the Adidas League, which now is starting to become a Pandora's box with college basketball now with everything the way it's going on, but that's grassroots. Those kids are not really paying those egregious player fees to play because those shoe companies are taking care of this. We got kids paying outrageous amount of money to go to DA and pay $4,000 or $5,000 a year, but where's the development at? I mean, I don't see any development. I don't see where, the last two Olympics we've not had a team in the Olympics. But our women's teams in the Olympics every year. Yeah. They're either in the final or they win it, or they're in the World Cup final, they win it or they lose it. So is it just like they have a different type of staff? Like, this side of the building does all the work and this side is a bunch of, I don't know what's going on. Yeah. It to me, it's unexcusable. We've taken a step back. And they need a clean house. Any other country we've seen have clean house. We saw that with Germany back in 2004 in the Euro and didn't even make the Euro. 10 years later, they've won the World Cup. They're one of the best teams in the world. I think right now we need a clean house. I think it needs to start from the top. It needs to go through the bottom. We have a really good youth system coming through right now. Our U17s are now advanced into the round of 16. Our U20s were in the round of 8 this past summer in the U20 World Cup. But we've had that before. We've seen Lane and Donovan at that age too, where those guys are 17s and 20s in the final in both. But it translated for them at some point. But these last two generations, it's never translated. Yeah. But the biggest question for me is this: what kind of pressure have they seen when they've come back home? Because in all honesty, we could talk about, but no one else is talking about it. They're not in the World Cup. They're done. It's over with. No one cares. Someone has to care, because when England or Germany loses, someone cares. Yeah. Those guys are under pressure when they go back home. And I think it's outrageous. I mean, for a player like Christian Pulisic, that's absolutely criminal to not see a 19-year-old kid not get a chance to play at the biggest stage in world soccer, and we got to wait 5 more years to see him play.
Well, he's still getting paid, though. Don't worry about him making $8 million over in Germany. Okay, Chris Black, Francis mentioned something about the difference between the men's team and the women's team. You were a part of U.S. soccer there for a while. What have you seen?
Well, the first thing on the women's side, we were so far ahead of everyone else by using our collegiate system. On the women's side, that holds up. The money wasn't there in the rest of the world like it was in the men's side. At this point, there's only 2 EPL teams that don't have women's teams at the top level senior teams. One's Man United, which is criminal. It's ridiculous that they don't have a women's team professionally. But if you think about it, as more and more EPL teams are getting women's sides, the French league is fantastic on the women's side. They're starting to accelerate away from women's soccer, in the U.S. women's soccer. We need to be careful in the United States. U.S. women's soccer is on the brink of getting left behind by the rest of the world. The collegiate system was fantastic for the top level for a long time, but the money's got to come from somewhere. Use those dollars that are coming into U.S. soccer and push the dollars down. Stop sucking the dollars up to the top. Push the dollars down, develop the coaches, give places for the players to play. I understand they have spent a lot of money on the women's side trying to prop up WUSA, but that was a disaster. We can talk about a different time. But the money needs to be moved somewhere to help, because we're about to get left behind. On the men's side, yes, collegiate soccer is hurting the U.S. national team. It still has a place. That is the top level of soccer for a lot of people. It's a great experience. But at the top level on the men's side, the money rolling through EPL, it's not just because Jimmy's sitting here, but through the other professional men's leagues is ridiculous. And we need to let our players go. Stop pulling them back in the men's side. If Sargent, thank you for leaving the country. Get over to Europe as fast as you can. Pulisic, come back for the national team. Holidays with the family. Besides that, stay over in the Bundesliga.
And at some point, Chris is going to drop the mic and walk off the studio. Okay, this is why we saved Jimmy for the last part here. I wanted him to hear these two guys, and Jimmy can bring a wealth of experience, not just from the United States, but also from over in England and in Europe and youth development. So, Jimmy, the floor is yours.
Well, I think the points that both these guys are making are excellent points. But for me at the moment, I would look at the US national team and say they don't currently have an identity to the way they play. So we can talk a lot from the structure top down, but there's no identity. Every time I've seen a good US team play, they've been very organised, very fit, very hard-working, very tough to break down. The last World Cup, when they were in the group of death, nobody gave them a chance to get out of the bracket. Yet not only did they get out of the bracket, they were very successful. Right. So they've had success. They've had success in the World Cup prior to that, where I remember watching them play Germany in the quarterfinal. And in my opinion, they outplayed Germany that day. Should have beaten them, should have got to the semi-final. Yet 8 years later, we're not getting to the World Cup. It's a problem, especially in the CONCACAF. Now, you're talking years ago when the last time they didn't make it, there was only 24 teams. Now there's 32 teams going to the World Cup, and CONCACAF is not the strongest of regions, and they should be dominating that alongside Mexico. So disappointing, but for me, they don't have an identity. They've come away from what's made them successful. They've come away from being hardworking. I think they're getting a little bit carried away maybe with, hate to say it, maybe thinking they're a little bit further ahead than what they actually are, and they've forgotten what's made them successful. So it's going to be a struggle. The good news with this is that with every negative, they're going to have to look at ways to now improve it. Germany had this back in the 1990s where they had to change things. Actually 2000, I think they lost to England 5-1. And after that game, the Bundesliga, the German Federation, all got together and completely revamped German soccer. And now they're one of the best in the world. Right. So I think with this is going to come good things. I think the US has got to take a serious look. Everything top to bottom, from coach education to the development of players to the structure of the academy. I also go on and say, I think as a generation coming through, we're right now, we've lost that competitive edge. You know, even at the DA level, everybody plays. Everybody has to play a certain percentage of games. Everybody's, paying to play. So at that point, you've got to give players playing time. People aren't necessarily competing for positions as much as they used to. People aren't competing at training. So the competition's changed. People don't compete anymore. No. You just look at the MLS, and you have a bad season, you might only win a few games.
You're still in the playoffs.
But you don't get relegated. You don't get relegated.
You're absolutely right.
In England, if you finish bottom of the league, you get relegated. Yeah. That not only affects your club, it affects the coaches, it affects the families, it affects the community. It affects everybody. It's a big thing. So I think when there's no pressure on winning and having to win, and you're fighting for your lives in a relegation battle, how do your players understand what it's like to do that?
But again, that brings it the same as I think. At what point do you got to punish these kids for something? But the kids got to take the players have to take some accountability for this. Yeah. They have to for their lack of effort. I mean, you look at them. This started back late September at Red Bull Arena, when Costa Rica comes here and just plays them off the park, embarrasses them at Red Bull Arena. You had another couple of weeks to get that fixed, and there was nothing. I mean, you paid them off the park Friday night. That was a great result. They looked really, really good because you're thinking, some confidence going into, Port of Spain. They go play Trinidad and Tobago. I don't care if it rained it could have looked like a hurricane could have hit that place. Yeah, the field's wet. Yeah, it's heavy. You can't move the ball around. Central America, you see that a lot. Yeah. That's the problem. I mean, the fields down there are not going to be what you see in the States or you see at the Azteca in Mexico. That's still inexcusable when you have elite players that we do in this country, and you can't get a point? You've given up 2 goals in 30 minutes, and you scored one of them in the first 10. So, we can blame Bruce Arena, we can blame all these guys for a lot of this stuff, but the bottom line is this: the pay-to-play system's got to go to play elite soccer. That's got to go. It really has to, because at this point in time, and Jimmy knows this, going through Aston Villa and things like that, these kids are going through there. They're not paying a dime to play. Right. And all the money's going down for even going to inner city and finding players. You see it lacrosse. lacrosse was a all white American sport. You're starting to see these black kids coming out of Baltimore and things like that because these companies are going in here like, hey, let's start getting these kids to play. And look what's happening. They're going to big-time colleges. They're becoming stars. They're getting ready to – the league has become more diverse. We need to diverse the game.
Yeah, polo, they did that too. You check that out on 60 Minutes. Now, Jimmy, I think Francis made a point here that I think you want to speak up on a little bit. It is a little bit different structure here in the U.S. because there are so many competing sports. Obviously, soccer is the biggest in the world, but here you've got kids playing football, lacrosse, baseball, basketball. So it is a different structure for youth playing sports here.
It is a different structure, and some of the points you make are pretty valid points. But I look back to when I was playing, and I played at a club called Aston Villa, who were formerly the Premier League in England. And as a player growing up, you had to fight, you had to scrap. You wanted to get a professional contract. You were fighting every day at training to get that opportunity. You know, we didn't necessarily, we didn't pay fees to play, but at the same time, you learned a lot of valuable lessons from that. And the evolution of you as a player and the player you became was based on the experiences you had as a player. You had to sit on the bench sometimes. You didn't get to play all the time, and you either fought your way out of it and proved yourself and had to earn your spot, or you were just not going to play.
Right.
So you had to figure it out. You had to work harder. You had to compete. Everything you did, you had to compete. And I just think now, if I was a player when I was playing at Aston Villa, I wanted a contract and I'd fight everything I had to do to get that. Yeah. Now, if a player has to fight for a position or fight for a place, you'll often see, instead of them fighting and saying, hey, let's go and get that spot, they'll leave the club or they'll transfer out and go and play at another school. If that was me as a kid growing up, my mother would have slapped me stupid. You've got to go and prove the coach wrong. So, times have changed. Times have changed.
All right, Chris Black doesn't keep his mouth shut very long, but he has here. So, Chris, we're going to give you the last word on this, and then we'll sign out.
Well, I'm going to say one thing. Iceland, they've been in the news for soccer for a while. And I understand. Well done. I understand it's not apples, orange, whatever. But all you have to say is their head coach is a dentist. He's not a professional soccer coach like we think of here. He's a dentist. But why? They're able to get the best soccer minds coaching because they make their fees affordable for coaches that get licenses and get educated. And he's able to do it as a part-time job. Here you can't do that, which is one of the reasons I'm off instructional staff. You cannot have a non-full-time soccer job and really do the job justice of what, to be fair, the parents and kids are demanding that much time. So that being said, fantastic. And in Iceland, the best story on Iceland I've got is when they won Euro, the kit man had to fly back to Iceland after every game after the first 3 games because they only brought 3 jerseys and they give one away every single game.
Were they Hummel jerseys?
No, but great for sales. They were not. I looked into it. We weren't allowed to bring those into the country. But that being said, those are guys that went out there and fought. They didn't expect to be given anything. U.S. expected just to get their spot. In the easiest, I will say it, the easiest region, CONCACAF should give one of our spots to Europe. They should give one of their spots to South America. I mean, it's that bad, and that's my region. So if we can't get through here, we just expected to have it. And it's sad, but I do feel bad for them. If you watch the last few minutes of those games, the amount of people that walked around or time wasted when we needed time was egregious and appalling as I yelled at the television as quietly as possible because the kids were sleeping.
And you do realize that Iceland is the size of Corpus Christi, Texas.
Thank you, Francis, for the geography lesson.
We have 350 million people in this country. We don't have anybody.
And Delta Landon, by the way.
We can do this for another hour. Jimmy, what's coming up at Pace Center here coming up this week?
Well, we've got games coming up this weekend. We've got all our high school players will be shortly returning, and then we'll be off down to North Carolina for college showcase events. We've got academies coming up, camps coming up in November, December. So busy time period coming up, exciting time period. We get all the teams back, and we'll get into the winter season ready to go to compete for state championships this year.
Jimmy Walker, love it when you come in. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Chris Black, head coach of St. Ursula, good luck in the postseason. Francis Stevens, assistant coach Northview, good luck to you guys in the postseason as well. This has been maybe one of the best ever Sidekicks. We'll try to see what we do next week.
Oh, man.